Good evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, which means it's Tavern Talks at the Shifty Boar. Our guest tonight, the wonderful Ginny Loveday, joining us for a little bit of discussion about Dungeons and Dragons. Of course, our channel, the Master of Dungeons, does pretty much everything about D&D. We'd like to bring in content creators and people who have a lot of experience and talk about their experience with Dungeons and Dragons. Ginny, hello. How's it going?
Hello, it is going well. Actually, it's going quite nice. The weather is wonderful today. Yeah.
Very, very cool. Very cool. So basically, we'll as some of the viewers have seen the previous episodes, we're going to ask Ginny a few questions, kind of like an interview, and then discuss the projects that she has going on and things of that nature. So let's go ahead and get into it. First of all, of course, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons. So when did you begin playing D&D? What was your first experience with Dungeons and Dragons?
So I did not play until I went off to college because I grew up in a very small town in Tennessee, and there was no one to play Dungeons and Dragons with. There was no Dungeons and Dragons to be found anywhere. It was not a thing. So I didn't get started until later in life. But once I played for the first time, that was it. I was like, this is fun. This is my game. These are my people.
Nice.
So and that's been a while. That's been a while back now.
Right. I'm like coming on 40 years of being a DM, closing 40 years of being a DM at Gen Con this year will be the 40th anniversary when I started myself. But did you start as a dungeon master or did you start as a player?
I played first. First campaign I played through, my friend Katie Cole ran. But then the next campaign we did, we were doing a round robin style of DMing. And I thought, they were going to skip me because, I'd only been playing for a little bit. But no, they did not. They get to me and they're like, all right, next week it's you. That was Horde of the Dragon Queen. I had to run the Hunting Lodge chapter.
Oh, okay. So how did the session go if you started with Horde of the Dragon Queen? If you started actually, I should say, how soon after you began playing did you actually start DMing? Was it like a year, a few weeks, a few months?
No, it was a couple of months, to say maybe 4 or 5, I don't know, less than a year, definitely.
Okay, that's good. So how'd the session go?
For those of you familiar with that campaign in that particular spot, there's a tapestry that if they touch, they get teleported up the mountain, and every single one of them touched it. It was great, let me tell you. So it went pretty well, though. Where the Dragon Queen is kind of laid out in a way that you can do it chapter by chapter without having to back and forth like you do with a lot of the books. So I really only had to focus on the one bit, so that made it a lot less overwhelming. So
when you were running that and you were preparing it, what do you think was the hardest thing to learn as a DM to prepare for running your first session?
It's a great question. So I did know the people that we were playing with, and we'd played for a while, so that made it easier, obviously, because I understand like what they enjoy most, and they were pretty combat happy. And that chapter presented a lot of combat options, and they also were the type who would touch everything. Everything needed to be examined. We're going to find all of the traps the old-fashioned way. So really for me, I just went through and made a lot of notes on what are the monsters, what cool things can they do, what are the traps, where does that send them, and then all the other things that I knew were going to come up, and then tried to absorb some of the lore as well that was present in there, because we learned a little bit more about the cultists in that chapter. So it was pretty intimidating, I'm not gonna lie, 'cause my first time, and like everyone I was playing with had been playing D&D for 15-20 years at that point, and it's like, here you go.
Nice.
It went well.
Do you enjoy being more of a player in D&D, or do you enjoy dungeon mastering more?
Right, so it really varies. Like I enjoy at conventions running games for new players and seeing the joy on their face. But there's also something really satisfying, like home games, or even like Winter Fantasy, which is essentially just a bunch of friends who all play D&D together anyways. So getting the gang back together, as it were, and sitting down and getting up to shenanigans. So pretty even split, although I do more DMing than I do playing nowadays.
And speaking of Winter Fantasy, we do on our live stream on Sundays, we do play AL rules. Of course. So we're running through the keys from the Golden Vault right now. So tell us a little bit about your history with AL and D&D organized play.
All right. So yeah, I don't do anything but halves. So I started into D&D. That was 4th edition, and then my group, as I said, had been gaming forever and ever. So we did the D&D Next playtest. We were really jazzed about that. There were some things we didn't like; those didn't end up in the game, so it doesn't matter. For everyone doing the current playtest, it's fine. It's not all going to end up in the game. Don't worry about it. That's been definitely experience that I've been able to share a lot. But from there, really got into just playing adventurously because it was available. It really fit our schedules. Most of our friends played it. We all went to conventions to play it, and so from there, was in Knoxville, Tennessee at that point in time. Jay Anderson and I were kind of, he was leading the stores on the east side of town. I was leading a store on the west side of town that I really just kind of steamrolled over them. And I was like, hey, we're going to play D&D in your shop. That's cool, right? But anyway, we realized we didn't have a local coordinator, so we weren't getting everything promptly. And we wanted to play the cool content. So we submitted both of us to be local coordinators for the region and got approved for that. And then couple months later, the regional coordinator for the Southeast region stepped down and they did open applications. And I was like, well, they're going to choose someone else, but for funsies here, let's apply and see what feedback I can get. And no, they chose me. And so then I was the regional coordinator for eventually all of the Southeast region that stretches from Virginia over to Missouri down to Louisiana, Florida. Huge area. So set out with the single-minded mission of getting more people to play games, darn it. Yeah, and contacted about 800 stores in the region, hired, I'm going to use air quotes there because there's no money involved, but hired about a dozen local coordinators and would have hired more had the program carried on. And, set out to just bring organized play to more conventions, to more stores, to more, it's always been my passion because I find it is an excellent stepping stone into D&D for people who don't have an established friend group who already plays, or for people who do, but my friends can't play at a time when I'm available, so I just need some pickup games, right? So that's really been my history, and then I continue to do organized play stuff with the conventions that I organize and on Baldwin Games and all of that.
Well, speaking of organized conventions and such,
yeah.
But speaking of organizing conventions, discuss some of the conventions you work with, some of the stuff you've organized in the past.
All right. Well, let's go back. Let's go back a little bit here. Let's do chronological here. So first convention that I went to, because, again, why do things by halves, was Dragon Con. And I was like, wow, this is huge. This is amazing. I love everything about this. Dragon Con, gaming at Dragon Con, finding gaming at Dragon Con, figuring out how to do gaming at Dragon Con, none of it is intuitive. And so that was frustrating. So, I wanted gaming to be something that was accessible. So then went to a couple more conventions, went to Origins, where I met the Baldwin Games folks, was like, man, this is a well-oiled machine. Did Gen Con, did Winter Fantasy, etc. Really got into all of that. And then we had started organizing a small local charity convention in Knoxville, Save versus Hunger. So that was kind of the first one that I got in on organizing, was doing all of the D&D for that. Really wish that was still ongoing, but the pandemic we cannot get a venue to do that anymore. It's really sad because last year we did it in 2018, I believe. We raised $18,000 for the local food bank. So that really kind of jazzed me up into doing more conventions. And then we go back to that regional coordinator thing, and I've been talking to so many stores. I ended up being contacted by a fairly large convention in Atlanta. They wanted to bring in D&D, and so I was trying to get one of my Atlanta coordinators to do it. But I mean, I guess Memorial Day weekend is a day when people want to go on family holidays and whatnot. So they were all going to be out of town.
Yeah.
So I told MomoCon first. I was like, no, there's no one available. And they were like, well, what about you? And I'm like, what about me? They're like, you can come, right? And I was like, oh no, I'm a poor college student. I cannot afford to come. They're like, what do we pay for everything? And I was like, okay, keep calling, talk to me. And so I got in, started Organized Adventures League for them. That grew. I'm the tabletop director for RPGs at MomoCon now, and have been for like the past 4 or 5 years. I don't know, where's time gone? So that's my biggest one that I'm a director for. So that's like 50,000 attendees almost. So I mean, that's, this is a decent sized con.
Yeah,
And then of course, I've helped. Yeah, I've helped Dave month after month with many of the virtual D&D weekends and organizing other online events. Like we organized the May Days, 10-day online charity convention. Jonathan Connor, myself and some other brave, foolish, whatever, adjective you want to put there, volunteers did when the pandemic came down and we still wanted to play D&D with people around the world. That was a 10-day long, 24 hours a day event. We were very ambitious. And then I've just helped with a lot of conventions. I don't know. I have a problem where if I go to a convention and I'm not working, I somehow end up working. I was not working for Dave at PAX Unplugged this last con, but it would have been very hard to tell that.
So speaking of organized play and conventions and stuff like that, obviously you're a writer, you're a content creator, designer, editor, and such like that. Tell us about some of the tabletop RPGs you've worked with, some of the adventures you've written for Adventurers League.
So I got my start writing. I had demonstrated competence at being an organizer, and somebody's like, the CCC program, so at that point in time, the convention created content, which later became community created content and then Dungeon Craft, had just rolled out. And one of the cons that I'd been talking to about just, helping them with their stuff was like, hey, you can write, right? And I was like, I have indeed written words in my life. And they're like, no, like you can write a D&D adventure. And I was like, maybe. So they contracted me to write one. And actually about the same time, I got a contract. I was actually about halfway through writing it, and I got a contract from Wizards to write an Adventurers League adventure for the Waterdeep Dragon Heist tie-in season, so season 8. For those of you who are familiar with it, that was the one where we started having big change-ups in the rules and the format and the everything.
Like 4th edition, we don't talk about season 8.
Yeah. If you really hate yourself, you can pretend like you're me and you can go read all the reviews for that adventure I wrote for that season, because none of them are actually about me, but they're all scathingly negative.
Ooh, what?
Oh yeah, hundreds and hundreds of reviews and comments about how it's clearly my fault that they changed the rules. But anyways, wrote that adventure despite the kerfluffle with all the rules changes and everything. It was a fun experience. And I clearly did okay at it. They invited me back again. And then I worked on the Dreams of the Red Wizards, which I know is near and dear to you. I kicked off the second storyline there. So Dreams of the Red Wizard 04, which has a name that I cannot remember, but it does. But anyway. But yeah, so that kind of kicked off the whole storyline with King Hecaton being kidnapped again, and then the Red Wizards have taken them and turned them into a Death Knight. Spoilers for anyone who hasn't played that. But that was thrilling. Writing what is billed as a 6-hour tier 3 adventure. But please, if you've ever ran it in exactly 6 hours without cutting content, please let me know how. Anyone out there listening? Because I can't do it.
I will note that when I said about season 8, I was not talking about the adventures. Adventures I really had a blast with. I was talking about the Adventures League rules. Yes, not the adventures.
Yeah. No. And that's why I said the comments aren't about me. But yeah, so I wrote that, and then I wrote some epics.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's what I was going to ask you about next. My favorite campaign world is Ravenloft and the Domains of Dread. So talk a little bit about the Mist Hunters. Actually, how did the Mist Hunters was kind of one of our, we had Eberron and such like that as a separate campaign, like separated. But the way that Mist Hunters was designed, how did that come about, and how did you start working with that?
Mist Hunters was super fun. So I'd done the Icewind Dale epic with Connor prior to that, so I'd gotten some experience. So then they were looking for someone to write another epic, and my partner Alan Patrick was still an admin at that point in time, and they were really just like, timeline was too short, people weren't available, they didn't like the content, etc., etc. And I was just like, hi, hey, what's up? So I came on board to write the epic finale for the Mist Hunters campaign, teamed up with Jeremy Forbing, because I had the experience writing epics, and he had the extensive lore knowledge for everything Ravenloft. I didn't have it in my brain, but we have all of the Ravenloft books in the library, so I had access to everything. So that was super fun because we really got to play with, a lot of interesting kind of set pieces and mechanics and stuff. So the Mist Hunters campaign was interesting because you are the level that the adventure needs you to be. Your character just is that level, and it's its own like self-contained thing. Although they've changed that now. Now you can play with other stuff.
Yes.
But
for those of you that are playing AL, they have added the Mist Hunters used to be self-contained. Now they do have a Ravenloft storyline for Ravenloft Adventures League, where you can play Curse of Strahd, the Season 4 modules, and the Mist Hunters as well, plus Ravenloft DC.
which there's some really great Ravenloft DC out there now too. I played some at GaryCon, but that was so much fun. So we were in gosh, what is the domain? Aslan Rex is Dreadlord. I am struggling today, clearly. But anyways, so we were doing that one, and we're supposed to be wrapping up this like big finale where you've been investigating all the way through the storyline to find out like who is like messing with things, who's got this big plot going to destroy various domains of dread and everything, and how do we stop it? And so you get to this big epic finale where you get kind of drawn into all of these like mirror dimensions and confronting like fears, like fear of being a failure, letting your family down, losing a loved one, being alone, or simply just being a failure. And that's so we got to address all of these topics and really like, what do players do? What do their characters do when they're confronted with like, the moral quandary of like, you've got these two groups of shadowy figures and they're both shouting at you and sound like your family members, but you can only save one of them. What do you do? And so that was super fun getting to do all of that, and then also really tying it in at the end with like this, all right, well, you've made a choice now, you've done a thing, and regardless of what you've done, everything is starting to collapse. It may be good, it may be bad. So got to throw some great like chase scene stuff in there too, which I always love. It was super fun. Went to Riot.
So, as a that's kind of talking about like as a writer and designer, like what stuff have you done for editing? Some of your other things. I know you've had experience with podcasting, streaming, social media management, and such like that. Tell us about a little bit about some of that those projects.
Yeah, I do too much. I wouldn't recommend that to anyone else. But yeah, so the writing and everything, and then was part of the Gilded Ups program briefly. So that was like people who wrote content on the DMs Guild. It was partnered with Wizards so that you got the books early and could write content to go along with the books as they released, supplemental content. So doing that, we had a group where we had to do everything needed to be self-contained within the group. So all of the design, the project management, the editing, the layout, the art, well, not the art necessarily, we could contract that out because we didn't tell the artist what we're working on. Just like, here's your art brief. No questions taken. But so they were like, okay, well, we can all write. That's why we're all here. But we need these other skills. And I was like, I can edit words. I have edited hundreds of fanfics. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm also very familiar with the style guide and the templates, which was more important, the technical bits.
Oh yeah.
So edited a couple of things there, and people were like, "Oh, you're actually good at this. You're giving great, insight and feedback and everything. So kind of got started there, and then really started doing a lot more editing work when I was unemployed heading into the pandemic. I was unemployed for like a 6-month stretch, and that was kind of miserable. But found a job right as the pandemic started. Great timing. But just kind of put myself out there for like, I could do any of these things if anyone wants to pay me money. I need money. We'll exchange services for funds.
Yeah.
And so got to do a bit more of that. And that was really interesting because really kind of getting out into the wider world of I'm not just working with the guild adepts who are very talented individuals and now starting to like do editing for like the everyday Joe, who's putting stuff out there. And that's kind of a different skill set too, because you're kind of editing, but you're also kind of coaching because you don't know what you don't know when you start creating. Like if you haven't, used the styles, in a Word template before, if you haven't read the entire style guide, which there's a number of creators out there who have never even seen the D&D style guide because it is technically an internal document, which is floating around the internet if you want to find it, is really high. And so people don't know that they're making these mistakes that make their stuff look not polished and professional. So being able to kind of coach people through that. And then just kind of took that, freelance for some other companies. I did a lot of work with Alligator Alley Entertainment. So they do Esper Genesis, which is still 5e. And they've done some other stuff as well. And then like Nerdburger Games, which is a more indie company. I do a lot of editing for them. And then did some writing for like Renegade Games for actually a book that's been announced now, the Action and Adventure Field Guide. So, no, you know what? It's whatever.
Okay. You have a lot on your plate. We've already established that. Sometimes remembering titles is definitely difficult. I completely understand that. So speaking of employment and stuff like that, tell us a little bit about your full-time TTRPG gig with Steamforged Games.
Yeah. So through doing too much, right? I had freelanced for Steamforged. I did some writing for them on their there we are, Animal Adventures product line. A book which actually just hit shelves and I can't quite reach it or I'd pull it out too. But Animal Adventures, The Faraway Sea. So I did a good bit of design work on that and got to know the team over there. And then they were at GaryCon last year. And so I went up there to do some contract work for them running games because we were doing previews of the Dark Souls RPG. And I was very, I don't know, disillusioned is a really nice way. Huh?
I think we hung out a little bit then because you were up there running for them and I was up running for World of Game Design.
You were doing World of Game Design, yeah, and we were all running in kind of a similar space. A bunch of us were running there in the forum hallway, which if you haven't been to GaryCon, it's more like a little foyer next to the vendor hall that opens directly into the outside, which is important because it is generally very cold at that time of year in Wisconsin, and I was freezing having all of my games that year.
You were cosplaying too.
Yeah, I was like, I would kill for a bonfire, a Dark Souls bonfire right now. I would probably step into it willingly. But was very disillusioned with my day job at that point in time. My muggle job was going through a lot of struggles with that. And so was just like, hey, you guys like me. I don't know if you're looking for any help or whatever, but just so you know, I'm trying to get rid of my day job. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. And they could take a hint. So they were like, well, we don't really need any full-time designers, but with the debacle that just happened with the Dark Souls release and some editorial issues on that, we do need an editor. Have you ever done that? And I was like, yeah, I have. So I did a test edit for them, and they were like, oh, this is great. And so got hired on. I started with them last August. Gen Con was my first event with them officially. And yeah, that's been great. I love the guys over there. So they're all based out of Manchester, UK. So we work kind of asynchronously, so I still work from home. But really get to dive into some of the settings that they have. So I love the animal adventures stuff because it's super cute. And who doesn't want to be, a corgi who is a ranger? Like, you are a corgi. You can talk and all of that. You're just adorable. So that was really kind of like what I wanted to do. But then we also have the Epic Encounters boxes, which are super fun. So those are just like everything you need in a box with amazing miniatures and maps. And then Dark Souls, which is what my life has been lately. I have been buried in Dark Souls editing, and it's a lot. but we have a lot of stuff coming out because we have the core book come out, and the bestiary is out in PDF form. Printing is going for that, and then there's another book, which the contents of that haven't been announced. So but that's what I've just finished up. Just finished up first rounds of edits on. But it's been announced that there's another book. Everyone knows that's on our server.
For those that are watching, either watching live or might be watching this on demand later or on our YouTube channel, go ahead and tell them a little bit about the Dark Souls game.
All right, yeah, Dark Souls. One, beautiful. If you get the book, it won't look like my book exactly because I've got the rare first print. But Dark Souls, the RPG, if you're familiar with, this is beautiful. It's got gold leaf and it's very art heavy. There's so much black ink in this book. But if you've played any of the games, so Dark Souls is a brutal and thankless game. The most commonly seen screen in the game is page 1 of our book. It says, "You died." This is by far the most commonly seen scene in the game because you die. All right, so you are the unkindled, which are short story of the backstory. People who you're trying to kind of save the world, the first flame and everything going way back, and there's a lot of sorceries that have happened. But the Gwyn, the Lord Gwyn, fed people to the flame in order to kind of save the world from a worse fate, which is complete extinction. And so you're going through, you're killing monsters, collecting souls, trying to level up, and every time you die, you respawn at a bonfire, but you don't remember everything. So that's been very exciting. I got to introduce a lot of players to the miracle of the bonfire over and over again, which my boss Richard informed me is the nicest way of saying, I killed all of their characters repeatedly again and again. The session went great, everyone. Because that's how you start out a game. So I would start out the intro sessions by introducing them to the Iron Golem, immediately killing them all because they have no chance of beating that. And then they all resurrect. The Iron Golem is nowhere to be seen. They have vague recollections of being in this room before. They don't know one another. They don't know what they're doing, but they want to get out of the castle. That's what they want at first. And then you go through and they realize outside is probably worse than inside. You start to see these massive, like pus-filled, like bestial demons and like undead, and there's hollows wandering around, just like soulless, kind of like zombies. It's kind of, and it's a really, really like thematic heavy game, so really leans on like the grim bleakness of everything, but and a little bit toward the horror aspects of it, because a lot of the stuff that kind of happens in the backstory and the lore is just like they sacrificed what, and they did what to who, and it didn't actually help anything, but then they tried it again.
Yeah. A pretty, very, very dark, macabre style game. Yeah.
Yeah. And for everyone who's played Elden Ring recently, if you hadn't played Dark Souls, very similar. But so that was super fun. Kind of converting that to a role-playing game, because obviously in the video game you are the single unkindled going through and trying to figure it out, what's going on. And here, as an RPG, like you've got your group, your crew, and so we really encourage like teamwork, thinking as a unit. What order do we want to go in? Because the way that initiative works is very variable. It is based on 5e, but it's definitely a 5e hack, emphasis on hack. We've retooled all the classes. How you create your character is different. The magic system, we completely threw that out the window and have another one. The way that you get weapons and armor and spells is different. Completely separate bestiary. So like the underlying, like which dice to roll, and you have a general idea of how things like mechanically are going to work. But aside from that, like it's a separate game, and everything that you need is in the core book. But being able to play this and bring it to life was just so much fun. Like I had so many players who sat down and they're like, I have played the video game and I want to see how this goes. And at the end of it, they were like, that was great. I died like 12 times, I think. Never learned my lesson, not once. But we did in the end. We usually get one party member who would enter every room with, I would like to tactically retreat. Sure yet. Now I know where this is going. I haven't died in 6 chambers in these. They've died 12 times and they're not going to remember when they come back. And I'm like, you don't want to walk up to the edge of that pond? Well, why not? Go ahead, try it. So it's really fun seeing the different ways people approach it. Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about, because you actually stream as well and you have podcasts as well. Tell us a little bit about some of those as well too, so people can tune into those. Actually, we can also give you a shout out here on our Twitch channel to send people over there as well.
Yeah. So I started out podcasting, took over the D&D Roundtable podcast from James Introcaso, Paige Lightman and I did, and we did that for a while until the pandemic, because we got busier during the pandemic, unlike most people. I don't really know how that happened. And then, so that went on hiatus, and I had started up my own Twitch channel, which they've just posted the link to. Thank you, Otter. And I was doing a weekly show there, The Designer's Den, where I would talk to designers and other creators about their creative process, and generally about like one thing that they bring an example of, like, this is an adventure I really love, whether they wrote it, someone else wrote it, whatever. We talk about what it is that appeals to them about the adventure, and then just like their creative process, because it's really interesting seeing like how people start. Like various people, when you're sitting there and you're looking at a blank page, like where do you get your inspiration from? Like where do you start? Do you start with just like, you just have a fully formed story in your head somehow? Or are you like, man, all right, so I've had the mimic stuck in my head for like 3 weeks, so I need to do an adventure that features mimics very heavily so I can get this out of here, which is methodology that I like to use. Or sometimes, I thought of this really cool location, so I want to like center a dungeon crawl around it, and then I'm just going to build everything out from there. Like, how do people do it? Like, there's so many variations. Like, and I've heard so many interesting things on it. It's really helped me personally, like, learn and grow as a designer, because some of this you don't even think of. Like, one of my friends was like, I've done a whole zine and we based it on music. Each adventure in the zine is based on a specific genre and song. Like one of them was Carly Rae Jepsen's "Call Me Maybe," and it was very Fae themed adventure where they want you to call them by their name. You should do that, right? Definitely with the Fae. Just go ahead, just say their name. It's gonna be fine. Everything's fine. And other various things. Rainbow Castle. I can't remember that. But anyways, though, he also had one that kind of harkened back to a first edition, maybe second edition adventure, where there was this kind of castle up on a hill, which was apparently an image taken from a record cover to be used on that D&D module. And so he went back to the record, and did a different adventure based on the music on it. So that was pretty fun. But yeah,
we talk about DMing and stuff like that. It's really good to have you on here because we can actually ask questions. But instead of putting, what would you get, like, instead of asking you a question like, what piece of advice would you give to a veteran dungeon master or a new dungeon master? Instead, let's just oppose that with your designing and say, what is a piece of advice you would give to a new writer or a new designer that's going to try to start like putting out their first dungeon craft adventure?
I mean, it's just, yeah, and I give the same advice to everyone when they start. Like, if you're first starting out writing anything, it's gonna suck. The first thing's gonna suck. You're gonna throw it in the trash, or you're gonna wish you threw it in the trash if you published it. That's me. Second thing is probably gonna suck also. Like, the only way to get better is just to keep doing it. And if you're putting it out there publicly as you're doing it along the way, to not get disheartened. The internet is cruel. Yes. The internet is heartless, and they will rip it to shreds. And just because it's not that person's cup of tea doesn't mean there's not someone out there who is like, oh, somebody has finally written this little gnome fairy garden, whimsical traipse through the world that I've always kind of had in my head but couldn't figure out how to do it, and I love everything about it. Whereas, other people might just be like, well, this is just a joke and there's nothing serious about it, and you're just against everything that D&D stands for. We should all just go through here murder hoboing, and you're all like making friends and daisy chains. And I'm like, yeah, that's D&D too, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no wrong way to D&D, right? So
Yeah.
from the classic dungeon crawl of like Dungeon of the Mad Mage to Witchlight Carnival, like those are both D&D.
And that's something we talk with about a lot when, because like John and Troy and I over at the with mentoring with GM Tim and stuff, and Matt, we always talk about keep in mind that like you said, there's no one way to D&D. With us as DMs, we do run, hundreds of games a year. We're running with hundreds of different players a year for all the conventions, the virtual D&D weekends. So you have to be adaptive, and like you said, write what you love, and you'll find people that like that as well, right?
Yeah, and that what you're talking about there, that really goes into like my second piece of advice I give to writers is step away from your home group. I don't care how much you love them. Step away from your home group, go to a convention, play a dozen or so games with strangers. See what they love, see what they like, see how varied it is. Then step back and try to write something. Or even better, go to convention and run games for strangers. That really gives you like this insight into like how many like different play styles there are, ways to run games there are. And especially like as a player, you can see like, okay, so I would play the exact same adventure by several DMs and be like, I know it was the same adventure, but these were all different experiences. And like I think that's something important to note, because like you made the baby, but once you give the baby away, like the village is raising it now. It's not going to be the same child that you birthed. How someone else runs it is going to be entirely different than how you envision it in your head. And so it's important to write things in such a way that you're writing an adventure that is a series of prompts and guidance rather than writing a novel. Because if you need the plot to go a certain way, then you want to be a novelist, not an adventure writer.
Yeah. That's actually one of the things that I'm being very cautious about with the New Dreams of Red Wizard storyline is I basically work out the plot lines and just the blurbs and stuff for each section. I pass it over to Cassandra. She actually fills it in more. And then we hand it over to the artist. And then she says, well, what do we want to do for consistency? I was like, if there's any questions about that, feel free. But I don't want to actually read the adventures because, like you said, I pass it on and I don't want to look at it and be overly critical. And these authors are doing great work. You know what I mean? Because it might not go in somewhere. It's kind of like a game of telephone. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out at the end of the storyline, because I want them to be able to be creative without, this is not what I had in mind or something like that. So definitely have that idea.
One of the scenes from my Dreams of Wizards of 4 adventure that like people come up to me time and time again and they're like, I love the bit when like you're in the swamp and it's part 2 and you're going up and you're approaching the camp, and then all of a sudden you realize you're like surrounded by gelatinous cubes. Why are there so many of them here? Like, they're not a threat, clearly, because they move so slowly that you could just, walk around them and all. But it's just very disconcerting to be like, all right, there's one gelatinous cube. That's fine. There's another one. That's a little weird. I've now spotted over a dozen gelatinous cubes. What is going on? And like people over and over again. That was nowhere in Greg's outline. That was not in Greg's outline.
Yes, that's the whole thing of making sure that the authors, when you're putting those out there for the authors to do that they have the room to be creative. So that's really cool to be able to step back and not like micromanage in a way when they're designing. So what is something that you would give in the same vein of advice to a veteran designer? Because we always talk about being a DM, you're always learning. As a writer and a creator, you're always learning as well. What's something that a veteran designer or writer something like you said, they might not have thought of before in their process when they're working things out?
And, I think that's kind of where I'm getting to at the point in my, like, I guess, career trajectory there is, like, you need to branch out. You might have your bread and butter that you come back to, which, is writing like organized play adventures for me. Like that's what I like. It's what I'm good at. But I'm going to keep writing the same stale content if I don't branch out, read new literature, watch new movies, write for new systems, play new systems, just read new systems, right? Because like I've got Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and I've recently learned to play that, and like I have so many more ideas about like how like relationships and all of that can go in my D&D adventures now because of the way that so it's based on the masks system for anyone who hasn't played it, and the way that they handle all of that is entirely different, but it's so great to just like see like the way that other systems do things so that you're not like falling into the same rut over and over again, because if all you do is produce the same content, people are going to stop buying it.
Yeah, because you'll get stale. You won't get outside your box, outside your comfort zone. That's good advice. Yeah, definitely. So what's your current D&D schedule like right now?
Um, well, so if we're talking like playing D&D, very minimal. If we're talking like D&D and D&D related activities, a la Hank Hill, I sell D&D and D&D accessories. My life is chock full of D&D. Like I work full time, doing editing and consulting on design work, because that's an important task of being an on-staff editor, is looking at your writers, your designers, and being like, so I see what you put down here, and I don't want to poo-poo all over it, but this particular bit's really stupid. Can you explain to me what you were going for? Because clearly it's not translated here, because I'm sure you had a great idea and this just isn't it. So, spend full-time, so 40-ish hours a week, varying, doing that. I attend a lot of conventions now as special guest. I was just at GaryCon. I'm going to be on the D20 cruise next week. We sail on the 19th, so leaving in 1 week. Actually, very excited about that. I've never been on a cruise. Rooming with the GM Tim, so we're gonna have a blast there. And
Nice.
So, I mostly play games at conventions. I played 2 games at GaryCon. I played Teddy's Ravenloft Dungeon Craft, the first one in the GaryCon series, so set in Harakir, which if you like Dune, play this adventure. Oh my god, it was so much fun. It was great. I almost died because my character was an idiot, but it was so much fun. So I play, I don't know, maybe a couple dozen games a year at this point. But then I got MomoCon coming up at the end of May, where I'm not currently planning on running, but that is the plan every year. And every year I run games.
So actually,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Because you get this line of players, because it's walk up only for our intro tables. You get this line of players, and then you've got just like 6 or 7 that you're gonna have to turn away because you don't have one last DM. And I'm like, no, sit down, you. I'll do it myself.
So go ahead and so MomoCon's coming up at the end of May. Tell everyone where they can go to when registration opens, if it's already open, where they can go to get information, all of that too.
Yeah, if you want to come hang out with me in person, you can come down to Atlanta to the Georgia World Congress Center, May 25th through 28th. MomoCon.com. Badge registration has been open for a while. There are still hotels in the hotel block, so that's great if you like that. It's great that it's downtown Atlanta. There's a million hotels. But the pre-registration for RPG events goes live on our Warhorn on the 1st of May. So you haven't missed that yet. Once you buy your badge tickets, you sign up for your games. There's no additional cost to play any other games, which is something that I really like. Could see if we keep that going. Don't know. But yeah, so we've got an Adventurers League slew of games lined up. We're actually running some of those GaryCon Ravenloft adventures, and we're running an old school one. We're running the Marionette.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, so I let my assistant director in charge of Adventurers League give me a slate of options, because we don't run new content, because MomoCon focuses primarily on new players and like brand new players. We get a ton of people who are there just like, I've seen D&D on the internet, and I don't know how to play any role-playing game. Is that a problem?
Nope.
No. Come on in. We love you already.
That's exactly what I'm there for.
Yeah. So it's whether you're a new player or a veteran, it's a super fun time. Half the fun of being there as a veteran player, my DMs have told me, because they all sit down and play as well, is just being able to be like, helping with the other players, and just like see it all click for them, and be like their realization that like, this is my game, these are my people. And making all of those new friends. So do come out and join us. If you're interested in learning more about volunteering at MomoCon, which you can still do at this point in time because I still need volunteers. Registration closes on the 8th, but you can find that on my website, jennyloveday.com/MomoCon, or if you just go to the website, there's a button at the top of the menu. And all the information is there for how to volunteer. If you don't volunteer this year, you can do it next year or the year after. Any year is great. Or you can just come hang out. That's fine too. We've got a slate of panels lined up. I've got some wonderful guests for this year. Amanda Hammond, who was the senior designer at Wizards. So she's lead designer on Keys from the Golden Vault, on Strixhaven. She's going to be there. Alexander Stangroom, the chief operations officer over at Cobalt Press. Little Red Dot, their marketing and Twitch marketing director and their Twitch person. Critical Bard, Gwen Marshall with Arcanus Press, who Ancestries and Cultures, like that was a huge change in the industry. And a couple other people whose names I've forgotten, and I'm so sorry if you're listening to this. I love you all. But that's going to be so much fun. So definitely, if you want to hang out with me in person, like that's the next big event. And then after that, it's Gen Con.
Yeah.
Which I'm currently planning on just attending. That's weird. I don't know if I'll be able to.
I was thinking I wasn't going to go this year, and then I'm always like, why do you always act like you're not going to go to Gen Con when you go to Gen Con every year? So I've got to take care of some of that stuff, signing up for the games and stuff tonight. So we got a few minutes left, so let's talk about what you do outside of D&D, outside of gaming. I know you've mentioned before you love all things Disney. You have a couple of pets, all of that. You do costume design. Tell us a little bit about that.
So it feels like my entire life does tie back into RPGs, which is mostly true. But outside of that, we've got four adorable animals in the house. I've got my 2 cats, Rasputin and Marie, the Empress Marie. She's too good for you, don't worry. And then we have a 16-year-old like pit bull mutt mix, Neil. He loves to sleep and fart. And then Siegfried is our roommate's puppy. He's a Pomsky, and his current fascination is eating shoes, which is not great. We're not happy about that. So we're working on that. But when I'm not hanging out with the animals, we love to travel. Alan and I brought Disney Vacation Club, and we're very excited because they've just reopened annual pass sales. So we're going to buy those too now, but annual pass holders. So we go down to Orlando fairly frequently to go to the parks. I love, just like being at the park. It's just like such a magical place. We got a bunch of friends who work down there as well. Some partners who live down there as well. And everyone knows Thomas Valley. If you don't know Thomas Valley, I don't know how you missed out if you organize play. He does lots of stuff, but he works for the Mouse, so we go down and hang out with him and his family and stuff. And it's just something really just like relaxing and rejuvenating, but also exhausting about a nice day at the parks. Although Epcot during any of the festivals that they do is like my favorite, because I'm going to eat way too much food and drink way too many drinks, and like I don't know, that's just the right kind of adult fun. And then when we're not doing that, right? I just like to travel.
Yeah,
we're gonna go to the beach with my mom for her birthday this year, and I think we might go to Greece next year for our honeymoon. We're getting married at Disney. I love Disney that much.
Yes, I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to mention that, but I wasn't sure how public everything it was. We had talked about stuff internally with D&G. So.
No, it's fine. So Alan and I we're having our wedding at Disney in September, so that's coming up. You all can't see this on the stream, but that's Cinderella's carriage on the side of my engagement ring there, because he's wonderful. He picked out all of them himself because I'm a princess. And so that is going to be absolutely magical. Then we'll get to spend some time with our friends in the parks. And conveniently, the convention that I normally do in Orlando, Crucible, is the weekend after the wedding. We did not plan that.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. That's really awesome.
So we might just stay down there for a couple of weeks.
There you go.
But yeah, so that's that. And then with the other conventions that I do, so I cosplay every day at MomoCon in addition to being a director. And I usually do Dragon Con every year. My friends and I, we do, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 costumes for Dragon Con.
Very, very nice.
Just a couple. Nothing big, you know.
Well, since we are coming to the end of the stream, why don't we go ahead and you tell everyone where they can find you on social media? Do you have a link tree? Do you have your Twitter? All of that stuff. Go ahead and let them all know where they can find you online.
Yeah, you can find me online at Ginny Loveday on pretty much everything. It's also my website, GinnyLoveday.com. I do have a link tree. I think that it is linked. Yeah, it's linked on my Twitter bio. But basically, like, if you get to any of my things, though, they all link in a circular fashion. But you can also literally just type my name into Google.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
You get me. It's just me.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
well, thank you, Ginny, for coming on tonight. I really, really appreciate it. I hope everyone that was watching tonight or happen to be watching on video on demand, YouTube, will see if we can put some of our the links in the YouTube once we get the YouTube video up as well to help out with MomoCon and all of that. But thank you so much for coming on. Thanks, Alan. Thank Alan for letting you helping you to take care of the kid while you were being able to help stream with us here. But thanks everyone for watching tonight. You can find us again if you're not a member of our Discord community server. Down below us, you can click on the Discord on the About Us section. Click on the Discord panel. We also have all of our link tree down there as well. That has all of our socials as well. If you haven't followed, definitely get into Discord. Choose your roles, choose your pronouns, all of that. Find out what content you want to follow. Tomorrow we are going to be having our normal dungeon delving stream from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern time. We will not be streaming on Friday as Friday does start the virtual D&D weekend. So there's still tickets available for that at the Yawning Portal. So check that out. And again, thank you, Ginny, so much. All right. Everyone have a great night and happy adventuring.